Okay, so this morning, so the last few weeks, we've been looking at emotions. We looked at destructive emotions, constructive emotions, virtuous mental factors. So now we're moving on from there to a sort of more can be quite technical and dry topic. This is, it's a sort of around the philosophical view, and it can feel really dry if we can't connect it to our own experience, and and learning to work with deeper analysis. So, we need to take time to get over the technical lingo if we're not familiar with it, but it's really necessary. This is why we have technical terms in all sorts of fields to really delineate different concepts. So it is necessary. It's similar in modern philosophy, studying that. So here we are looking at what's called objects and objects possessors. So this is our first handout that we have there. And as I said, once we get familiar with the concepts, then it makes communication easier. Meantime, we might be thinking, why am I spending my time talking about objects and object possessors? And it's in the basic program, the topic of awareness and knowers really goes into much more detail. So we're starting off mainly looking from the object side today. However, you can't do one without the other. They are dependent arisings. So the objects are basically the basis of how we act, whether we act in a constructive way or not. And the object possesses, which is the consciousness, awareness that knows objects, right? And so we talk about different, the awareness as well as awareness, as consciousness, as the possessed object or engaged object, meaning the way that awareness interacts with that. We'll look at those terms further on when we're looking at different types of awareness. All right, so the definition of an object generally that we use is anything that exists, any existent phenomena, and that's defined as, how do we know whether it exists or not? It's that which is known by consciousness. Right. And then consciousness is that which knows objects. So to exist, it must be knowable by an awareness for something to exist. And in Buddhism, we're only interested in things that are knowable. Otherwise, what's the point of talking about things that we can't know? Even sometimes you think talking about things we can know is confusing enough. So we, mind, consciousness, object possessor, because it possesses or engages its respective object. So this can be both non-conceptual and conceptual. Non-conceptual being the direct perception of, eye sense power, ear sense power, nose sense power, tongue sense power, and tactility. So that direct perceptual awareness for an ordinary being, or conceptually, that we make sense of something in our mind, we label it, or if we're not aware of it currently, there are things that we take on scriptural references and things like karma, that we don't know. We know at some level we can observe, but it gets to more subtle levels and it gets a bit obscure for us. But we can use authoritative sources to reason and validate. We infer things, so different types of consciousness. So it said our mind possesses the object through engaging it. In other words, bringing it into awareness. So these are different terms that are used. And it can be very confusing. It's just like becoming aware of it, engaging with it, making contact with it. So the mind or consciousness is defined relative to the object it knows or is aware of. So we're talking about specifically the different primary minds and all existent phenomena objects because of them, because they have to be that which is known by awareness. Okay. So that's in brief. You spend a lot more time when you go in the basic program of all those aspects. And so then we divide, there's different divisions of objects and why we divide them up. So we divide them into permanent things and functioning things. And the reason for that is we're always forever trying to change functioning things, which are impermanent, into permanent things, And, things change all the time, but we can have this concept of, I want to be the same person, have a permanent sense of self, but it'd be nice to be slimmer or, a bit more this, a bit more that, or however we want to look. We might want to be the opposite. We want to have more muscles or whatever, but, we hold on to this permanent sense of self, which you also know doesn't exist. So we don't realize how contradictory our thinking is a lot of the time. We want to change. We also want not to change, isn't it? We can check up. So this is saying that in this is embedded in a sort of fundamental distortion of how things exist, how phenomena exist. And so right from the beginning, the basis of our understanding is mistaken. So we hold on to this idea. And then when the discrepancy comes between my idea and reality, and when that gets stronger, we get upset. And then all the other afflictions come along, right? So this happens. And we think, oh, it's not fair. Reality is not playing fair. Well, reality is being reality. So we experience some, as I say, cognitive dissonance, that it's not in sync with my ideas and getting further and further apart and feeling like not in control. And I think COVID is a very good example of that, things we took for granted that, we were comfortable with and suddenly were curtailed. Maybe not as much in WA as elsewhere, but still they were curtailed. We had this seemingly permanent border wall between Western Australia and the rest of the world. Of course, we knew it wasn't permanent, or maybe we didn't know it wasn't permanent. Maybe we thought it was going to be permanent forever.
And supplies of toilet paper.
What was that?
Permanent supplies of toilet paper.
Assumed permanent supplies of toilet paper, and if everyone had been sensible, there would have been permanent supplies. But for some reason, it became the symbol of the panic of response to COVID. Very interesting how, we set a pretty low standard on what our response is to things. So when we divide into, objects into functioning things and permanent phenomena, our main interest is functioning things because they're impermanent. So we can say all the stuff, all the material basically everything we can see around us, plus things like love, compassion, all our positive qualities, as well as all our destructive emotions and so forth. So, a thing that is functioning so it performs a function, and so given that it performs a function, then it can't be permanent, because a permanent thing can't perform a function. It's just like there, basically, if it's permanent. So, it's very easy to think of various functions, a variety of functions of different objects, and how that makes change in the world. They exert an impact on the world, on ourselves. For example, love, anger have real impact and effect on the world. So anything that is real is capable of bringing impact, of bringing change. That's the way they function. And then we look at, just in passing, unreal phenomena, which is what's the point of focusing on those, because they don't exist. The traditional example that is used is horns of a rabbit. And the other one that was used a lot, I don't hear it so much because I think that's very interesting that we don't, is son of a barren woman. Now, you could say these days that's not such a hurdle, couldn't you? So I don't hear it used so much as an example, which is really interesting. So even some of the examples of unreal things can become real things. They're not permanently unreal. We can think about that. So, things matter because they perform functions and they have real impact. So we talk about functioning things being impermanent, synonymous with impermanent, or product. Okay, we can say producer and product, that which produces as well as a product. If something is a product, then it had to come into existence. So therefore it's got to be impermanent because it was produced. We might look at products like in the shopping centre and we see them as permanent until there's no toilet paper, and then they're not, for example. Well, permanent supply, permanently produced, shall we say. And the idea of they're momentary, they arise, they abide for a period of time, and they go out of existence. Any existent has to go out of existence. That's where we get distressed. So they're composed, they're composite, they are cause, and as I said, cause, producer, and result. So they produce result, like the example here, giving rise to sense consciousness. In other words, if a form wasn't there, the eye sense consciousness wouldn't arise and make contact with form. Whereas sound, ear sense consciousness wouldn't arise. Sound's easier probably for us, especially now we've got so many forms around us that we're very busy with our eye sense consciousness. But sound, like that sound of the plane, and now I can hear Millie, an absence of that sound. The absence of that sound's a permanent thing, but the sound itself is impermanent. And so that the sound, the ear sense consciousness rises when the sound arises to engage the sound and make sense of that. So it's not like always our ear sense consciousness is turned on, especially when we're asleep. Okay. Good example of that. And creating karma. We create karma all the time. That is something, a functioning thing. It's something impermanent. And the nature of functioning things continually changing moment to moment. That's what an impermanent thing is, changing moment to moment. And we look at that at a sort of very obvious coarse level and more subtle levels. And being composite, or, we, like in the Heart Sutra, it says compositional factors, which is all the mental factors that are not feeling and discrimination. Compositional factors, it's everything else, the composites of the mind, all the different bits of the mind. And so we've looked at those previously in summary. So it's an idea of things coming together, therefore dependent on causes and conditions. You've got to have the appropriate number of causes and conditions for that thing to arise. So being dependent on those causes and conditions which produces that result. And it says the appearing object of direct perceiver. So what appears to my eye sense consciousness, form and color, what appears to my ear sense consciousness, sound, and so forth, what appears. And then the mind comes in and elaborates all sorts of things on top, makes sense of it. But just that direct perceptual awareness. So, the functioning things are always compounded. They're never singular. They're not permanent. They're not independent. They're not unitary. And this is coming at refuting the schools, non-Buddhist schools, pre-Buddhist schools that asserted something as being permanent, independent, and unitary, or singular. Singular means it's not coming together dependent on causes and conditions. And yet, is there any such thing? So far, no. Right. Well, any such functioning thing? No. Okay. So everything being made up of all these parts, of all these causes and conditions coming together in the appropriate way, is there's multiple inputs to every single object. So it gives you a sense of the complexity of things, right? I guess this is what I don't guess, this is what they study in physics, for example. So we have to then understand the concept of such a functioning thing, and also the implications of that. So the implications of things being impermanent is that we can make change. The important implication that anything in our life is changing moment to moment and makes an impact moment to moment, so that we can then facilitate change for ourselves and others. That's the beauty of it. This is why we're more interested in functioning things than non-functioning things. So if something is a functioning thing, it has to change, even though, as I said at the beginning, we grasp at things to be permanent. Take myself, grasping at enduring. Even when I think of future lives, what's the image that I have? It's this person in future lives, which it wouldn't be, because this person will be dead. This body will definitely not be there. But on the basis of this body, and for myself, I still have this sort of concept of this self on the basis of this body as what's going to endure. And yet we know that that's not true, is it? And this is, in the Heart Sutra, where it says, form is empty, emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other, form is not other than emptiness, emptiness is not other than form. That fourfold reasoning, emptiness and dependent arising, that form is used as the example because our main attachment is to our body, isn't it? Think about it. Maybe it's to chocolate cake, but I think my main attachment is my body. I can live without chocolate cake, but I can't live without my body. And to think about it, we've never in this life experienced a separation from the body, I think, unless anybody's had out-of-body experiences. But I've never experienced a separation from this body, so I can't imagine that separation from the body. So there's a sense of permanence of me on that basis. So this is a way of interrogating. Yes, Venerable Yangshan.
How about in dreams where you can be a different person? Like it's not you, but it's a different exterior.
Yeah, but I guess it can. You can experiment with that, with dreams. And see, and I was just thinking about lucid dreaming, where they say before you go to sleep, to deliberately think about something like your hand or your arm as a reference point to come back to in your dream, like your actual physical body. Now, I've never been able to do that, but it is a way of developing lucid dreaming, probably because I too much prefer just being asleep. But I guess there's still a sense of me there, isn't it? A sense of self.
But it's not attached to this body.
It's not no, because you're correct. Yeah, good thing to interrogate, because the dream body itself is a very impermanent phenomenon. It doesn't last very long, does it? Yeah. I mean, it's interesting too, because we have all sorts of daydreams and fantasies which are not real. So there's no point in engaging them in a way, because it's not reality. You know, why bother spending time with them? You think about that. So all these parts coming together, and this is where physics makes it incredibly fascinating, and interact with each other and create other complex compounded phenomena. Isn't it? You know, we study that when we were in school about how all the different chemicals come together and produce a different, what do you call it? Remember that, alloys, or the sort of combinations of, like compounding chemists, all the bits and pieces coming together, and you go to the compounding chemist and you get the right compounded particle medicine or whatever. Yeah. So we can take an example like love. Love is not permanent. We might be very aware of that. We can talk about unconditional love, but is there really such a thing? Because love comes into existence dependent on many conditions, causes and conditions, right? So it's a two-way street. It's an interaction. It's it's changing moment by moment, and it's not necessarily there 24/7. When there's a need, the love arises. It's not always there. It performs a function. It arises. And it's produced by causes and conditions. And we have to have the right coming together of different causes and conditions. If some are missing, well, maybe we can cultivate those, or maybe we say, oh, there was an obstacle to all that, obstructing the coming together of all the causes and conditions. For example, how many people pre-COVID were planning trips overseas, and then there was an obstacle coming together. So that no matter how many conditions you brought together and did all the planning and bought the ticket and all sorts of things. And it's very interesting in terms of the Dharma, just an example, but we don't think about when all the causes and conditions come together, the fact that they do come together. Generally, we don't think about that, only when they don't come together. And my example of that is when His Eminence Chodron Rinpoche first came to Australia, came to Sydney, and I was there to greet him, and then I was there to, so this is the I grasping, do all the, we offered body, speech and mind, and we had the chai and the sweet rice and so forth. And then I ended up in hospital the rest of the time. And so suddenly you realize, oh, when they say it's got to take a lot of conditions coming together, now I'm experiencing that lack of the conditions, the full conditions, because being in hospital instead of being there. So we can look at those times and go, see, all the conditions But if that hadn't happened, if I wouldn't have thought about the cause and conditions that had to come together, even though I knew in terms of planning for the whole thing, you know, some level of what it takes. But we don't think about that, do we? Really, until it doesn't work according to our plan. And we think about it. And usually not in a positive way. I had to get over the poor me and I realized practice Dharma. Yeah. Wasn't the first thought though. Okay. So love is a compounded phenomenon and it has many different strands. So it's, you know, when we're activated, there are different aspects that feed into that, isn't it? You know, then we may feel like a warm, cozy feeling. But sometimes an act of love doesn't come with a warm, cozy feeling, does it? So it's not, you know, we really need to look at the intention behind it rather than the feeling. And, you know, we can say that love is not always a warm, fuzzy feeling, cozy feeling, you know, such as the love our teachers have for us, you know, to guide us and so forth, that the Buddha has for us, not necessarily a warm, fuzzy feeling. So more important than how we feel is the intention behind that. So there's lots of things going on. So we can't, you know, something like love is, there's nothing simplistic about that. And we can look at everything else like that. And that we look at the implications, what happens when that love changes, how we feel then. It's sometimes difficult for us to accept, yet everything's subject to change, everything changes. But that's an example of, you know, we will be together forever. Even diamonds. It says diamonds are forever. Are diamonds forever? Well, because diamonds.
They last a long time, but it can't be forever.
Well, yeah, you could grind it down into diamond dust. Is it still a diamond? You know, I mean, think about it. Just experiment like that. Won't be worth as much. So the Buddha said, you know, some wishes, some desires will go unfulfilled. And so we can work on the causes and conditions, say, for example, for love, and bring those together. Like in a relationship, it's not like it just sort of, you've got to work at it, isn't it? To keep that going. You've got to work at it to keep bringing the conditions, the right conditions together to keep that going. I read about or heard about a study that was done on long-term relationships, being 15 years or more. So however long we call long-term itself is a relative thing. And it, you know, basically what sustains it is an acceptance basically of change. They didn't say acceptance of change, but that sort of openness and respect for each other, even acknowledging you've got different interests and not trying to force the other person to have your interests and do things your way and so forth. Really a sense of acceptance and respect, and so a lot goes into that. Yeah, that coming together. I mean, those of you who are in long-term relationships or have been in long-term relationships can think of the work you had to put in to keep that alive or are putting into keeping that going. So one of our main obstacles is wanting, you know, whatever is impermanent, or not necessarily whatever is impermanent, but impermanent things to be permanent, unchanging. So it's a false idea, and you know, if love can't change, we can't bring about change in other things. In fact, you know, what's the use of a permanent love? Permanent phenomena themselves aren't interesting. They're like just totally fixed. They have no efficacy. They don't change. They can't facilitate change. So here, looking at permanent phenomena, so phenomena that are non-things, meaning non-functioning things, meaning not impermanent, non-produced phenomena, and uncompounded phenomena, so the sense of not disintegrating. So permanent doesn't mean that they're there all the time. You can have occasional permanent phenomena, and non-occasional permanent phenomena. So occasional permanent phenomena would be like the emptiness of the cup that arises. It's a permanent phenomenon, but in that emptiness stays permanent. So permanent in the Buddhist context doesn't mean eternal, but it remains fixed in dependence on the cup. When there's no longer cup, then there's no longer the emptiness of the cup, because there's nothing to be empty of. Right? The absence of anything. So I can say the absence of an elephant in this room is a permanent thing until there's an elephant in the room. I don't think we'd get an elephant in this room. Not quite. It would have to be very, very. What?
The 65-year-old elephant at the zoo.
Oh, what, just recently?
Yeah, it's been on the news the last couple of days.
Oh, well, impermanence of the elephant. Well, we can pray for precious human rebirth of the elephant.
Trisha.
Trisha died. All subject to death, isn't it? So I guess now we have the absence of Trisha, which is a permanent thing of itself, but Trisha's not. So it arises with the impermanent at the same time. So permanent phenomena don't perform functions, they don't produce results. So they don't, in the same way that I said that, you know, like eye sense consciousness arises in dependence on the forms, the objects being there, or ear sense consciousness, etc. This doesn't happen with permanent phenomena. They don't cause that consciousness perceiving them to arise. And they don't produce karma. They don't change moment to moment. And that's what we want everything not to do. Well, not everything. We want some things to change very quickly. Thank you very much. So they're not produced in dependence on causes and conditions, and they are appearing objects of conceptual consciousness. So as soon as I have an image, as soon as I think about John and I have an image of John, that image is a permanent thing. That permanent thing I can update from time to time, but because John changes over time, but the images itself, it doesn't. So, you know, we can think about us in terms of our sense of like our family, of our parents, for example. And, you know, I think I still have, do I still have a photo of my mother? Even though I know she's gone out of existence and doesn't look like that anymore, whatever she looks like these days. It's really interesting. It's sort of, that's a fixed image that hasn't changed. So, so examples of permanent phenomena, we talk about uncompounded space. So it means it doesn't come into existence dependent on causes and conditions. We can say, space is the absence of obstruction. Well, that's the definition. Space is the absence of obstruction. So the obstruction would be objects appearing in that space or something else in that space. So the absence of that, anything that's an absence, you can pretty much say is a permanent phenomenon. So it's related to, you know, permanent conceptual abstractions that don't change. But as I said, they're not eternal. They don't exist forever. They can go out. Well, they come together with functioning things. And so then we have to look at the things that we grasp at to be permanent. What sort of things do we grasp at to be permanent? I mean, I've mentioned the body, diamonds,
Loved ones.
loved ones, yeah. Health, health. Mountains, yeah, lots of things. So the earth, yes, to be a permanent thing. So the earth is not unchanging, is it? It's changing all the time. And when I was in Central Australia, we were having this conversation about the rocks also that look very solid and well, they are very solid and look very permanent. But you look at, you know that they're not. And I was thinking about the insects in the rocks know it very differently and know more sort of subtle aspects of the rocks, and or maybe other animals do as well. Just like in the earth, you know, they've discovered more and more microbes, like the living earth, down hundreds of miles down into the earth. And so, you know, when we in school study about the earth and all the bits that make up the earth, we know there's not anything permanent there. It's not, it's changing constantly, but we want a sense of permanence in terms of reliability. You know, we sort of freak out if the earth stops existing, then I will stop existing, and I hold on to a permanent sense of me existing. So, isn't it? Like when Y2K, when His Holiness was asked, what are we going to do? Oh, just go somewhere else. Right. More recently with His Holiness, you know, also saying along with the physicists that, you know, this earth is in a period of going out of existence. So, and again, His Holiness said, you know, to us as Dharma practitioners, you know, sort of gain the realizations, be in the Pure Land, and then you'll see the destruction of the world. Doesn't mean you'll be, what do you call it, apathetic to it, indifferent to it, but you won't be affected by it. So this sense of having such a fluid mind that just doesn't place things as being fixed and unchanging, so that, you know, with our different misconceptions, it's totally contrary to reality. And we know that as well. We are mixed up of contradictions, isn't it? Don't you think? I think. Okay, so let's try and see if we can make these ideas a bit experiential and do this meditation to sensitize ourselves to change in our lives, you know, to develop this sort of mindful awareness of the changing nature of things. So we've had, you know, I'm sure everyone's familiar with meditations on impermanence. Feeling more aware just on the basis of the body and the basis of our feelings, the basis of our awareness itself and how it experiences things moment to moment. We'll see how we go with that. And, you know, there may be, we may become more aware of, we're very aware of when we come to meditate and we want to be completely still, and then the thoughts are racing and they just seem to be endless, or we're distracted or drowsy or so forth. And all of that's okay, you know. Well, it's okay, you know, don't try and prevent that, just observe. But there, you know, there can be brief moments in our meditation, isn't it, when the mind is silent, stops talking, and that's very nice, but unfortunately that's not permanent either. But we can enjoy it while it lasts. Okay, so sitting in a comfortable posture, and resting your hands on a physical support in your lap. Most people got in the lap, and release the weight of your arms, your hands. Release the need for the muscles to stay tense or tight, soften them, let tension melt away. Have your eyes opened or closed or half open, closed, whatever works best for you. And your spine supporting you. So getting a sense of the space of the mind as a space of awareness, an aware space of the mind that knows objects, knows things. And we will invite different objects into the space of the mind to notice how easy it is for objects to arise, appear in that space and be known by your awareness. Right now, you may have an awareness of sound, plane going by, known by your awareness. So settle more deeply into meditation, being aware of your body contact with the seat or the mat, floor, getting a sense of solidity, firmness, supportive grounding, sense of stability. So letting sensations into your awareness that reassure the body that it's resting on a reliable, solid support. The ground, as we said, the earth, we have a sense of being solid and permanent. And invite different sensations from different parts of your body to come to your awareness. Not straining, not forcing. Just noticing the perhaps subtle sensations in your aware space from the crown of your head down to the tips of your toes. The crown tingling, itchy, maybe some warmth or coolness, or no sensation at all. So through our experience of tactility, we can know the sensations in the body. Allowing the sensations from the face to appear in your aware space. To see are the muscles soft or tightened around the forehead, jaw, eyes. And see everything's subject to change. If we can possibly change that, soften, relax the face model and welcome that sensation of ease, of softness. Being aware of the subtle sensations of the muscles of the throat. Just investigate that experience, that knowing. And notice both shoulders, how the shoulders are feeling. Often we hold tension, tightness, uncomfortable feelings. So not try and force it, just be aware of that. Let them be, no need to struggle. Being aware of the sensations of your upper arms, subtle touch of clothing on your skin, air on your skin, sensations at the elbows, arms, hands. Sensations of your chest in your awareness and the rhythm of your breath, the beating of your heart. Front of the chest, upper back. You continue to just welcome the sensations of your body into your aware space, into your awareness, your knowing. And if your thoughts take you elsewhere or your mind gets dull or sleepy, just, when you're aware, bring yourself back and invite new experiences to arise in your awareness. Sensations at the abdomen, the muscles deep within the abdominal cavity. Front of the body, the lower back. Sensations of your pelvis where very powerful muscles gather. Notice the weight of the pelvis resting on the seat. Comfortably resting here on the support. Letting go to gravity. The sensations in both the hips, bringing them to awareness. Simply just simple sensations, nothing spectacular, just as they are. Awareness of your upper legs, the knees, your lower legs, shins, calves, ankles, all the way down to the feet, the toes themselves, different sensations. Probably noticing changing of all the different sensations. So simply resting your body in your meditation posture, aware of the different sensations of the entire body, allow it to settle down, relax, unwind. Notice and be aware of different kinds of objects, experiences that come into your awareness, how sounds come and go, how everything that comes into your awareness is not constant, it changes, one thought replaced by another thought. Not to get caught up, just to observe this constant change, flux. So resting in this aware space of your mind, noticing the coming and going of different objects, different experiences, different types of sensations. Awareness of your breath alongside any thoughts or sounds or images, inner dialogue. And see if you can appreciate some of the specific characteristics of things, how they change, how they depend on causes and conditions, they dissolve. Disappear. And highlight to yourself amongst all these different objects of experience any helpful experiences that may be soothing, pleasant sensations. You can also acknowledge anything unpleasant or painful or difficult. And it's important in the meditation to highlight and build up our positive associations with our meditation practice, to nurture the associations that are beneficial, helpful, positive. And then gathering up all that positive energy. I think may that positive energy, that goodness stay with me and allow my body, mind, heart to continue to build beneficial habits to benefit me long after this meditation is over. Okay, so in your investigation, discovery, did you discover anything that was permanent, unchanging? Did it change all the time? All the different, anything stayed the same? Yes.
It says that the observer was unchanging.
The observer is unchanging. I've got this permanent sense of which is an idea that we have. So all ideas that we have that sense of the quality of permanence to them. Right. Doesn't mean they can't change, but that sense of permanence.
Trying to figure that out. The permanence. It's like the word permanence.
Yeah.
In English,
Yes.
usually means something unchanging.
It's unchanging at the time it arises, but it doesn't mean it is always there. So that's why it doesn't have an eternal quality. Whereas in English, I think the sense of permanence also has the sense of eternal, lasting forever. Yeah, right. That's the distinction.
Unchanging at the time of it arises.
Yeah. So at the time, it's unchanging. It's not. It is a yeah, my easiest one for me, that sense of generic image that I have of me or you or the Gompa, everything, absolutely everything. I've got, you know, car, right? I've got a generic image, or it's called a meaning generality. So it's a general idea of that. It's not specifically what it is. And so I impose that as something fixed onto things. And so that's the difference there. But if the thing wasn't there, I wouldn't impose that, would I? So it's not always there. Or if I'm not thinking about the thing, it's not there.
Something that's explained in the mindful.
Yes.
Available in text.
Yeah, so in the, as I said, in the basic program, there's the awareness and knowers, and I'm just thinking if that text is available outside of that. I'll check the full text and let you know. But you know, when we look at any of the sort of mind in Tibetan Buddhism, or the mind and its functions, or touch, you know, Geshe Rabten. And so usually you have this general introduction and then go on to minds and mental factors in the sort of second half. We've done how it's presented in this course is the other way around. And I have to say that, you know, when we were doing at Chenrezig Institute, then students wanted it the other way around. So maybe it works better for our understanding to be the other way around. Yeah, as we have done. Okay, so anything else? Any other sort of permanent unchanging? Was there a sense of the awareness itself being permanent, unchanging?
In my case, there's always a permanent distraction by sound.
Well,
I'm so drawn to anything.
sound.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I hear it. Battle.
Yeah. Yeah. So one thing is to just, so sound in this meditation is fine because it's an awareness of sound, and seeing if we can keep that awareness within the space of the body, not the sound out there, like the experience of the sound. So then that is actually part of it, knowing sound, but not being distracted by it, because then in a meditation like this, that's part of the object we're investigating. Yep. Okay. So from what we've discussed so far, what do you think? Why we investigate this? What's the implication of that in terms of our experience or our knowing, what can be known even by our awareness?
I keep going back to the original definition.
Yeah.
That an object is that which is known by awareness.
Yeah.
That trips me up all the time.
In what way trips you up?
Well, the object, I mean, it's this feeling that the object is there, whether my awareness sees it or not. But it's there independent of my awareness, basically.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that things don't exist unless, so it can be independent of your awareness, but there can be another awareness that knows it at that time or not. But yeah, what we're really looking at is how mind knows the object, right? The how of it, not whether the object exists or not, but how we engage the object. So an awareness needs to to know that object, we could say awareness needs to be able to know that object. If we look at the astronomy, for example, where, okay, you can say these things have been there, but have been extremely hidden. We'll look at this more next time, I think, the second sheet. So extremely hidden to our awareness, but it is knowable, and now they've just got stronger telescopes or spaceships or whatever, and can know what was previously unknown, because it's a knowable thing, right? But myself, I don't know that. It's not in my experience, and so I just have to take it on the authority of the astronomers. That consciousness knows, but this one doesn't. Yeah.
And then the other aspect is that consciousness arising with the object. Right?
Yeah.
You can only have the consciousness if it's an object.
Yeah. We're talking about, yeah.
But
Yeah.
then when my consciousness focuses on something that becomes an object, it's only part of my consciousness. That there's the other part of me that's directing my mind to that object. It's not that my total consciousness arises with the object.
Yeah, we looked at this when we looked at, to some extent, with the omnipresent mental factors. So all of those have to be present to engage the object, right? You'd say. And that can be on the basis of a direct perceptual consciousness or on the basis of mental consciousness, right? Which we could say that, you know, the direct perceptual awareness comes before that mental awareness, but it's so subtle that we can't distinguish the difference. So we would say, well, that all happens at the same time. Right? So this is where we've got to be clear in our definitions of consciousness as well, which consciousness we're talking about.
Can you have two consciousnesses exist at the same moment?
Well, if we're talking about sense perception, no, you can't have two at the same time.
That sense and mental.
Well, as I said, it's so quick that we can't perceive a distinction between that, even mental and mental, you know, because it's all these very, very teeny tiny moments of perception or conception. It's very subtle to distinguish each moment. So our experience of it is happening simultaneously, isn't it?
Yeah.
Our experience of it definitely is of it happening simultaneously. But it's generally said that it's the mind going quickly from one to the other, or consciousness going quickly from one consciousness to the other. But it's too subtle to notice. These were the sort of very subtle moments of mind.
So is that the same with introspection, where they say that a corner of your mind is looking at the rest of the mind?
Yeah, so they're different parts of mind. Well, it's a mental factor arising in the mind. Introspection is a mental factor of the mind. So you have the main mind plus a mental factor, yes, or multiple mental factors, actually. You have all the omnipresent mental factors arising at the same time, for example. Yeah. Yeah, I know it stretches the icky stuff. That's great, isn't it? Slippery stuff. Okay. Okay. So just maybe further on that. So for an idea to come to mind, there's got to be a consciousness, a mind preoccupied with that idea, mind So it's an impermanent what am I going to say? So the idea itself is not the thing that brings the change. It's the mind which perceives that, right? That brings the change. It changes results. Because the idea itself is a permanent thing, so it can't bring a result, whereas the mind that holds on to things brings the change. It's the one that brings the change. So that the idea itself is not, can't bring a result. They're static, you know. They don't grow, they don't change. We do update our ideas, like the astronomers do that, scientists do it all the time. So, for example, we have this idea of Australia, isn't it? And our idea of Australia is not the true changing Australia that's built up of all many gazillions, I don't know how many different parts we could say make up Australia. I mean, apart from the geography of the place and so forth, we also have all the, we think of Australia as a country of people and of certain animals and different composites of minerals and rocks and mountains and seas and so forth. Lots of things we can think of that make up that. Now it's interesting because when I was teaching at New South Wales University, we'd always have this one essay that, you know, the sort of, there was these foundational studies where students had to write about an Australian icon. So an icon is exactly that image, you know, is that unchanging image. So people chose people as icons, but it's not the actual person, it's our iconic image of it. It may not be a person, it could be, I don't know, the flag or kangaroo. Yes.
So does that mean the proverbial tree in the forest when it falls and there's no sentient beings to hear the sound of it falling, not only that there is no sound, but there's also no tree because there's nothing to perceive the image of the tree?
Yeah, this is a hypothetical that I have to say is full of flaws because I don't know yet a forest that would have no sentient beings that would perceive it falling. But yeah, I mean, the trees fall. Okay, whether I perceive it or not, or you perceive it or not, trees fall. It is knowable. It is a knowable thing. So whether it's observed at the moment of falling or not, it's still a knowable thing to awareness, right? Yeah? Yeah, it is still a knowable thing. Very knowable. Yeah. Because now we've all got an image of a tree falling, which is a permanent thing, but we would know a tree falling because it is reality that trees fall. So, yeah.
Well, it's reality that trees fall. But how do you know that that tree did fall?
Because it's on the ground.
Nobody's seen it. Nobody's perceived it.
No person has, but I can guarantee there's a lot of insects that have been running away, freaking out. Birds, yeah, yeah.
36,000.
How many? 36,000.
I heard a figure of there are 30,000 different animals in a mature tree.
Yeah, a hell of a lot, right? Just think of them all trying to escape the tree. I'm going to get out of here, it's falling. My home is gone. Crash. Okay. So I guess the idea is that, we loosen up by just contemplating it as we have been doing. It's really good to contemplate that, loosen up our idea of holding on to things as being permanent. We can look at our resistance to change, and we can, sort of, when changes come, maybe if we've really relaxed our mind around the grasping at permanence, then we're no longer shocked when things change, go out of existence, or when we're better equipped to deal with things, with change when they come. So here again, we can look at the situation of COVID and see how very differently many people coped or didn't cope. We had all the rallies and really angry people, as if somebody else had caused this to me, and and because it was going on and on and on, there was that sense of this is never going to end. Maybe still is this sense, because we're having an Omicron new wave, fourth wave. Yeah, so that idea, I love that word that I first heard being talked about a lot during the medical responses to COVID, of pivoting, that we have to learn to pivot, to look at things differently. I love it. Pivot, just pivot.
I think flexibility.
Flexibility, yeah.
Yes. In your mind, you can develop that as we age.
Yes.
The aging process is
Yeah.
so
Yes, because particularly,
in-face.
yeah, because aging, we can get very stuck in our fixed ideas,
I see how unhappy my father is.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
he
It's
struggles with his really
yeah, holding things as fixed makes us unhappy. So the more we can recognize that we do that and release that, then the more, hopefully, contentment and acceptance we can have. Yeah, acceptance. Yeah. Okay, we'll leave it there for today. Lots of food for thought. As you know, we've got a busy weekend coming up. Tomorrow we have a winter retreat, half day, 9 to 1, and then at 5, the Tibetan community is coming for our celebration and their celebration of His Holiness Dalai Lama's birthday.
Food is on the table. Food.
They're doing food, and so if anyone hasn't indicated they're coming, just for numbers of catering, I'm sure there'll be enough food to go around.
People are supposed to come RSVP.
People are supposed to RSVP to welcome it.
Yes.
Oh, to have had.
Well, they'll still be walking.
Oops, I haven't. I'll be walking. I didn't RSVP.
Oh, it's given.
Okay. And then Sunday we have the final meditation day or morning for presenting the path, discovering Buddhism. And then we have at 2 o'clock the refuge ceremony. And you want to talk about that? Or somebody wanted to talk to me about it? Yeah, okay, afterwards. All right, so, dedications. Page 16. Oh no, 17. We'll do it in Tibetan. Gewadi Nududa Glama Sange Dripune Drowa Chika Malupa De Salagopa Sho Janchup Senchok Rinpoche Makipa Namge Kuchi Kewa Nyampa Mepaya Gongne Gongdu Pelwa Sho. The long life prayers for our teachers, starting on page 19. Chikten kamdi pende malupa gangle shungwe sampel yishino katrin sume tenzin gazola sowa depso tushe lundruv shu. And then page 22, Lamas of Rinpoche, and then Osel. Tu su shan shin jam gun gyawe Tin sin yon pelwe kon chok du pose. Chuk sum ko we le bon tu dru. Ha da so du she gon du shap te shu. Lord of Dharma, who in accordance with the various dispositions of those to be subdued, makes clear in the light of your well-spoken advice the sacred Ganden tradition, essence of Buddha's teachings, of foremost and holy Lama, to you who are supreme. O Lama, please, please live long. Thank you.